we go. This is a review for communications, number 6. Thank you. And here's a few thoughts. First of all, you should be able to sketch decay. Sketch a decay for me right now. You need a lot of room. It's going to be a big, long review today. I'm hoping to burn up at least 3 pieces of paper. I might take out an entire rainforest tree today just by myself. They don't use rainforest trees for paper. Come on. It's usually just locals that cut them down and burn them because they want more farmland. They do use rainforest trees. It is really sad. I agree. Okay. So you should have been able to sketch a decay, which should have looked like that. If you didn't get that before, you need to get it now. Okay. Then, if I told you that this spot right here was 0, 2. Notice how that'll always be a 0, the starting value is always a 0, something. Okay, so then, if I give you another point down here, let's say that's at 8, 1. Write me an equation for this. Come on, guys. Enough with the pencils. Focus on the problem. I've already gone through 2 things now. I gave you a starting value. I gave you another point. You got to know how to start these. In case your brain is locked up, y equals a b to the x is how you start. I'll pause for a second while you work on this. You should probably start this one with the start value. That makes sense, right? Start with the start. Can you just plug in the 2 right here? Absolutely. But just so you know, you wouldn't have to have done that. You could have stuck this whole point in and it would have told you that a was 2. I'm going to show you that really quick. If I stick in this point, x is 0 and y is 2, watch what happens. What's b to the 0? It's equal to 1, so it just disappears. And look at that. It tells you a equals 2. See? Otherwise, you can just know that and jump right in and say 2. Then, what's the y or the b or the x? Well, this is an xy combo, so I stick that in for x, which is an 8. And the y, which is 1, 1 equals 2b to the 8th. Divide by 2, 1/2 equals b to the 8th. How do I get that 1 or the 8th power out of there? Put it to the 1/8 power. One really important thing, if you were doing this on a calculator, you would want to put 1/2 in a parenthesis, and then you'd want to put your power in a parenthesis. Now, I know on this test we're not going to use calculators, but on the next one we will. It's really common for kids to forget and just type that in, 1/2 divided by 1 divided by, and that'll be wrong. You got to have the parentheses or it'll mess up the order of operations. Okay, so we just figured out what b is. 1/2 to the 1/8. Well, what can I do with that? I put it into the equation. So now my final answer is y equals, a was 2, and b was 1/2 to the 1/8. And now the really common forget thing here, people forget to put in the x. There is an x, and it's where? On the top. X over 8. If you don't have an x, then you don't have an equation. Yeah, you need that x in there. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. Now, let's talk about a different kind. I'm just going to tell you a situation. In this case, I want you to tell me what equation you'd write for this. Let's say that we had 5% growth starting with 25. You got 25 sheep, and your flock grows by 5%. What's the equation for that? It's just an equation. 25 sheep, 5% growth. Okay, you should have said y equals, and start value is 25, and the growth is 1 plus 0.05 to the x. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. Let's make another one. Let's say that we have a decay rate. Listen close. We start with those same 25 sheep, but you're not a very good shepherd, and so your flock is shrinking. It's shrinking by 1.2%. Well, it's as simple as 1 minus, not 1.2. What do you put? 0, 1, 2. That's 1.2% written as a decimal. Okay, good. Now we're going to say, write an equation for this. I have 1 gram of whooponium. It's made up. 1 gram of waponium and got a half-life of 9 days. 1 gram of waponium. It's got a half-life of 9 days. I spend several hours every day trying to think of funny words I can use when I get stuck. It's the first time I've used that one in 24 years. I didn't want to use polonium because then some wise guy would be like, well, everybody knows the half-life of polonium is 237 years, so how come you didn't? So if I make up one like waponium, nobody can argue with me what the half-life is. All right, 1 times 1 half-life, 1 minus a half. What if somebody else says, I just wrote a half right there? Isn't that the same thing as 1 minus a half? Yes, either one's okay. 1 minus a half is a half. Okay, so that's the half-life, and then if I said 9 days, I should say x divided by 9, and here's one more really important thing. You need to say in days. Why? Because otherwise, that equation could be used, and you could say that it's about 9 weeks, or 9 years, or 9 hours, or 9 minutes. Yeah, so you have to say what it's in. Don't forget that. You could lose the whole point just for forgetting that. All right. Moving on, let's say that we had not half-life, but something like that, doubling. Okay, so say somebody's got an investment that he's been really good at doubling it every 4 years. He's able to double your investment every 4 years. You can start by giving him $2,000. What's the equation for that? You give the guy $2,000 and he's going to get it to double every 4 years. You should have said y equals $2,000 times double. Could I put a 2? Yes. Could I put a 1 plus 1? Even smarter. To the power of what? X over, wasn't it 4? All right. Very good. In years. All right. Now, what if I actually gave you a number of years now? You know where you'd put it? X or Y? X. So if I said 4 years, you'd put a 4 right here, and just think about that. That means this will be to the 1 power, right? That means this will be 2 to the 1, which is 2. That'll mean I'll times this by 2, which means it doubled. Does that make sense? Yep. All right. So what if I gave you instead an amount of money, and the guy says, I think you should leave your money in there until it gets to be $10,000. Where would you put the 10,000? So you'd put a 10,000 here, and then you divide by 2,000, and then it's that's a 5. 5 equals 1 plus 1 to the x over 4, and that's the kind where at that point I would not expect you to be able to solve it without a calculator. On the test, if they might just ask you to write the equation. That is the equation. In fact, I didn't even need to solve it as far as I did. Could have left it as the original. But that's an equation, and if they don't say to solve it, you don't have to solve it. Okay? All right. Mr. M, make sure you're where you're supposed to be. All right, good. All right, good. So, moving on. I don't want to say what I was observing. Let's move on. Write the equation for this situation. I'm going to have a limit, like the highest that it'll ever go is 100. Limit to growth. What did you do? All right. I'm going to pause for a second so I can explain this off the record. All right, here we go. So if the limit's 100, right now I hope you know we're talking about one of these kind, right? Okay, if the limit's 100 and the initial value is 10, initial means start. Now start at 10. I hope you know where that is. Right there, that's 10. But really, I was encouraging you to think of that as something comma something. Remember how the initial value, if you just use a 10, you're going to be tempted to stick it in the formula right like this. 1 plus ab to the x. You're going to be tempted to stick it right there and say that's a 10, and that'd be wrong. Remember? So what is this? What comma what? 0 comma 10, and therefore you should use that and stick that in for an xy combo, and you'll figure out a. You will not stick in a 10 for a. You'll figure out what a is. Do that. Everybody figure out what a is. Just figure out a first. Okay, so you solved for a. Here's what you should have done. You should have put this 0 comma 10 in here. 0 and 10. 10 equals 100 over 1 plus a. And the b to the 0 just drops out because the b to the 0 is a 1. Now I have to multiply both sides by 1 plus a. 1 plus a here and 1 plus a here. And then these will cancel these. And then I have, I'm not going to multiply that 10 in. It'll just save me time if I don't, because I'm trying to solve for a. Divide by 10. Divide by 10. And now I have 1 plus a equals 10. And I subtract 1. A must equal 9. Raise your hand if you had a equals 9. Okay, good. Do you get why we're not done? Because all we have right now is y equals the limit of the growth on top, 100 over 1 plus a is 9, b to the x. I still haven't even figured out b yet. How do I do that? Put the other point in. We haven't given you another point yet, but I will now. Let's say that right there, if that's a distance of 10, that looks like it's about 20 comma 50. So if you use that point 20 comma 50, you'll be able to figure out the b, and then you'll have the whole equation. All right, so at the point's 20 comma 50. I got to record here. Oh, I was recording the whole time. All right, so anyway, x is 20, y is 50, so there we go. 50 equals 100, going too fast, equals 100 over 1 plus, and that's a 9b to the 20th. That's a bit of a pain. Now I've got to multiply both sides by 1 plus 9b to the 20th, and I will do that. 50 times 1 plus 9b to the 20 equals, and I just do it to the other side, it's just going to cancel. If I wrote it right here, it would just cancel that. So I'll say 100. And yes, I'd be okay with you showing me that too in that way, as long as you show this step. Now I've got to solve, trying to get b alone. Dividing by 50. 1 plus 9b to the 20th equals 100 divided by 50 is 2. And now we subtract 1, and it'll be 1. And now I can get rid of the 9. It'll be b to the 20th equals 1/9. And the final stage is b is equal to, and I'm putting these both to the power of 1/20th. b is equal to 1/9 to the 1/20th. Now I can rewrite the whole equation. I'll do it in red. Y equals 100 on top over 1 plus, we got 9 for the a value, times the b value is this little complicated thing, 1/9 to the power of 1/20th to the x power. Raise your hand if you comprehended that, if you were able to comprehend that. Good. Because I don't think comprehended is actually a word. All right, so the last few kinds. Let's throw in some easy stuff. If I had this, what's the limit on the left end? Don't say it, write it. Write it correctly. Because seriously, even though most of you know the answer, if you write it wrong, I have to mark it wrong. Because the limit has very specific ways it has to be written. Like you can't have the X arrow just wherever you want. You got to have that right underneath the limb. Yes, question or answer? Yep. Okay. If I called this g of x instead of f of x, then you'd just say lim of g of x as x approaches whatever. Okay? All right. We were doing the left side, so you should have said, if we go way over here, what is x approaching? Negative infinity. Good. And then when I get there, how high will the graph be? 0. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. Now let's talk about another easy concept. What order to do things in. So if I have this, y equals 2 to the x, that's kind of your classic, is that growth or decay? Kind of your classic growth. And what if I change it to this? 7 times 2, 3x minus 6. That's a little different, isn't it? It's still got the parent function built into it, kind of here's the 2 to the x and here's the 2 to the x, but I did a few things differently. In order, 1, 2, and 3. What order would you have to do to get this to turn into that? What order does it have to be done in? What would the first thing be? What would the second thing be? Got a question or an answer? Okay. Remember, your answer should include things like this. Shrink factor, 1/8, horizontal, vertical, stretch, right 9, down 6, that kind of stuff. Okay, so first thing, go into the inside. Strongly recommended. It really does help you in the long run because most hard math problems have parentheses inside parentheses and you start at the very inside and you work your way out, just like the alien in the movie Alien. Okay, so on this 3x minus 6, what's the first thing you'd normally do in math? Multiply or subtract? Multiply is normally the first thing. So that's not what we do. We do the subtract part first. So you should have said right 6. Raise your hand if you had that part right. Good. Then the next step is this one, of course, and that one is not 3 times wider. It seems like it is, but it's actually a shrink. Horizontal shrink factor what? Yep. Factor 1/3. Okay, and then the last part is the 7, and that is a vertical stretch factor 7. How many of you would have got this one right? Okay, good. That's an easy point. I hate to have you have missed those. We've had that tested on many of these communication tests. That's more like R2-ish. You can dream if you want that it would be that easy for an R3. All right, and last but not least, a kind of problem that we haven't done very much. We'll see if you can handle it or not. You've got $5,000. It grows to $5 million in 5 years. And that actually does happen in the real world sometimes. There are people who are really good at trading stocks. They have to be good and lucky, and then that can happen. So 5,000 grows to 5 million in 5 years. Assuming there's exponential growth, which obviously it's growth, and we're just going to say for sure it was exponential growth, then what's the equation for that? As soon as I said, assuming it's exponential growth, you should have known, oh, y equals a b to the x. That's what the form is that you're supposed to have. Okay, so if we start with this, the starting value is pretty simple. A is what I said it was, 5,000. Start with 5,000 bucks. The growth, I don't know how much it grew. I mean, that's the thing I'm trying to figure out. But I'm smart enough to change that to a 1 plus a rate. Didn't have to do it that way, but you might have screwed up the answer if you didn't. And then the x is the time. Ooh, I knew that one. I was told the time. What was it? 5 years. And then, wait a minute, I didn't put in the 5 million anywhere. Where should that go? The y. You got it. Is this an equation that represents that situation?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
How do you know when to put it over the x?
Yes? Okay. Since this one is given to be in 5 years, the only thing I could have said is in years. And the difference here is we don't know if it's a doubling problem or a half-life problem. Save that for those kinds of problems.
So it's in per year, you don't have to do it over?
If it says it's in years, you should probably, to be safe, you should say in years. Now wait, so this is an important point. Do we know x in this case? Because some of you are acting like we don't know x. We do know x. What is x? It was 5, period, done. So if we didn't know x, that'd be a whole different thing. Then the x would have to be up in here somewhere, otherwise it's not exponential, right? So it'd either have to be x over 5 or 5x, but we know the years, so we don't need to worry about that. Now, showing that this is in years, since the problem says it's in years, it'd probably be smart for me to put that just to be extra safe. But I'm mostly looking for that on those doubling questions. When I have an answer like this, then I really want you to tell me what it's in. Okay, so any other questions or comments? Yes? Couldn't you solve for r? Yes, but if all I asked you for was an equation, you'd be doing a lot of extra work. Could you solve for r? Absolutely. You could solve for this one for r. So let's actually figure it out. Everybody take your equation you wrote and solve it for r. Let's see what kind of rate you'd need. It might be like 1,000% growth. Oh, it's not that hard. It is. You're going to divide by 5,000. A lot of stuff's going to cancel. So you divide by 5,000. That cancels that. 3 zeros will cancel. Doink, doink, doink. What's 5,000 divided by 5? 1,000 equals 1 plus r to the 5th. I think a lot of you might have had a b in here, and this is a lot better to have the 1 plus r. You might not get your full credit with a b. Anyway, and now I'm trying to get this r alone. I'm putting it to the power of 1/5 to the power of 1/5. And if I have a calculator and the ability to know that this needs to be in parentheses, 1,000 to the power of parentheses 1/5. Somebody got an answer for that? Nope. Okay, wait. So your question was, shouldn't I? Here's the problem right now. You're asking me to subtract 1, but then I have to get rid of this first. Now I can prove to you why this 5 has to go before this 1. Yes, eventually I'm going to have to subtract 1. But in the order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. A lot of people don't know this. If you are doing equation solving, you are doing it in exact reverse. You're going this way. You start with any add subtracts. Then you do multiplies and divides. See, I'll give you a simpler one. 2x plus 3 equals 8. Would you agree to solve this thing? I got to start by subtracting 3. And that's really because it's the lowest thing on the order of operations. Okay? So you do things in the opposite of the normal order. So when you're solving an equation, parentheses are supposed to become before exponents, but since we're going backwards when you're solving an equation, the exponent has to be done right now. And the last thing I'll do here is the parentheses. Get how that's really a parentheses that we're going to be doing there? So bottom line is, yeah, the order matters. And yes, I can't just subtract 1 right now. I have to do my 1/5 power right now. And now I have 1,000 to the 1/5. Would somebody help me with that? Oh, 1,000 to the 1/5. 3.9 what? Can anybody else verify that number or not? Okay, then I'm going to type it in again myself. I'm getting multiple answers for this. 1,000 to the power of parentheses 1/5. And you are correct, 3.98, thank you. Equals 1 plus r. And then I subtract 1. And I have 2.98 is my rate. Now, can anybody change that into a percentage? Because it certainly isn't 2.98%, because otherwise you could put money in the bank and it would grow that crazy big. No, this is, move the decimal over twice, 298% growth. That ever happen? Yes, but it's really, really rare. You got to get lucky. Got to buy a stock at just the right moment. Like when it's just about to go out of business, but then it doesn't, and then it turns out to be a big company, like Apple did. Apple almost went out of business. In fact, did you know that Apple would have gone out of business if it wasn't for the biggest competitor to Apple? I don't even still know why he did this, but the guy who owns Microsoft, which is who? Bill Gates, decided to give Apple a ton of money when they were just about to go under. And he didn't just give it to them as a gift. He bought their stock. It gave them kind of a deal where he'd invest in them. So he invested in them when they were just about to go under, and that saved them. And then Apple went on to kick their butts. So now Apple's way bigger than the company that saved them. The interesting fact. Yes, Bill Gates still had tons and tons of money. And Bill Gates is still alive, and he's got that going for him. All right. Any other questions? I can do lots from there, but I think I should stop for the video's sake. And just to clarify, I believe that Steve Jobs was a genius, and it is too bad that he's gone. And Apple stock has been fantastic to be in over those years, but so has actually Intel, the same company that Bill Gates owned. It's at its all-time high as of like last week, so Intel's still doing really well too. Okay, that's all I got.